The Phantom Menace. I know it, you know it, and your mom knows it. In all probability, you hate it. So I'm going to ask you, why Bash? I was 6 years old when this movie came out, and being a huge Star Wars fan, oh boy, it blew me away and then some. Well, on my premiere episode, I hope to have my question, why Bash, answered. So, here, I'll go into a little background. Starting off the series of the 6 movies shows us the early life of people like Obi-Wan and Anakin. Fair enough. So, why am I the odd man out here? Yeah, it was the year 2000. Yeah, the effects were cheesy and, it was corny in places, but as far as movies go, it was fantastic. I mean, granted, Jar Jar was a little annoying, but, think of... No, I'll save him for later. Honestly, I think that with this movie, I don't think that adults who had seen the original trilogy were the prime demographic. It doesn't mean that they didn't go and see it, and that doesn't mean that that's part of who they were aiming at, but I think it was primarily aimed at newcomers like me. I was 6 at the time. The only previous experience I'd had was when I saw parts of Return of the Jedi. No, I saw Return of the Jedi when I was 4. But being at such a young age, it didn't really stick in me the way that the original trilogy seemed to stick to other people at that time. So, naturally, I went to the theater, and I would say I liked it, but I came out crying, because, oh boy, Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn. I love you, Liam Neeson. Anyway, though, yeah, it was incredible. I loved the lightsaber fights, I loved the characters, I loved the story, I loved the setting. And I just, what's not to love, really? So let's go through each of the characters. Qui-Gon Jinn. He really seems like your typical master, but he really has a fierce independent streak. That's what I love about him. And it's really a shame that he couldn't come back in the rest of the prequels, because I really loved his character, and seeing him die just was a huge blow to me. I know I said this a million times, but I love him. Obi-Wan, he wasn't bad, but I don't think, aside for the epic fight with Darth Maul, I just don't think he was there often enough. Mostly because he wasn't with Qui-Gon on Tatooine. So, Obi-Wan may be a little weaker, but he makes up for it in the other 2 movies. But the one who hit me, I think, was Anakin. Now, I know you'll be like, but hold on a minute, his acting sucks. He's a 9-year-old kid, are you expecting Alec Baldwin? I mean, I loved him because I wasn't as old as he was. I was 6 when the movie came out, and the actor who played him was 10. But really, he acts like a 10-year-old kid does. He dreams of the world outside of the little shithole where he lives. He dreams big, and he acts and thinks like a kid. And that does include saying things that might come off as corny or hammy. But really, can you really put it past him for saying or doing things that a typical 10-year-old would? And I really think that when he meets Padme for the first time, it's unbearably cute, the way that he acts. Oh god, I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it. The pod racing, awesome. As I've seen a lot of racing scenes and racing movies in my lifetime, but that was cool. That was awesome. But as we all know, the crowning moment, or crowning character, I should say, Darth Maul. He was practically the mascot of this movie. He took the cool and ramped it up even further. Like, he was the man. But what I loved about him was that he was played by a master martial artist who did all of his own stunts and is a master of Shaolin Kung Fu. My brother met him, and he's really a great guy to be around. Yeah. The fight with Darth Maul, once again, shame that he was killed off. I would have loved to have seen him, but, you know, continuity rules, I guess. So, yeah. You've got such great characters. You've got one hell of a tearjerker of an ending, and it really sets the stage nicely for everything else. And not to mention that the political messages, although they seem a little trite at first, they're actually pretty interesting. Or they might be if you're into that kind of thing with politics and whatnot, but I still find it pretty interesting. Now, the one thing that this movie really gets flack for is the introduction of midi-chlorians. Now, if you're somebody who has rudimentary knowledge of Star Wars, then you know what the Force is. It's a mystical energy that gives the Jedi and Force-sensitive beings their powers. Everybody knows that. But this is where the common misconception comes in. Midi-chlorians are not the Force itself. They're indicators. They link a being to the Force and interpret the Force back to the host. They're not the Force itself. You can't... The Force is still spiritual. It's still vastly unknown. So, clearing that up, you can still... The Force can still have its mysticism and not compromise the wonder that most of us grew up with. So, with that being said, I'm going to end with my question. Why MASH? It was great. I loved it. And this movie really was a huge part of my childhood. So, stay tuned for next episode where I go into Star Wars Episode 2. Thanks, guys.